Thank you so much for coming here this afternoon. Today, we're going to be talking about this, 250 billion reasons why brands are backing sports. Don't worry, I will not be going through all 250 billion reasons. But the reason you might recognize that title is because MadFest very kindly have distributed that report out to all of the attendees here. I know it's in some of your inboxes already. For some of you, will be receiving it later. And it's a compendium of a whole bunch of analysis that we've done, which gives us a whole lot of excitement and enthusiasm and some data behind that as to why we believe brands should seriously be considering sport as an avenue to go and access audiences. There's three particular things I want to talk about today, so don't worry, we're only here for about 10 minutes, and these are all highlights from that report. The first is, we believe there's an enormous amount of data which shows it's an amazing time to be investing in sports IP. We then want to talk about, briefly, the fact that we think sponsorship and media spend needs some better balance. We think there's been a bit of a swing in the pendulum one way, and it might be beginning to swing back. And finally, as you look to navigate the possibilities there, we think intelligence is key to unlocking more value. But just to orient you and do a bit of an introduction, I work for an organization called Two Circles. We are a sports and entertainment marketing business, and we exist to deliver growth to those industries, whether it's audience growth or revenue growth. We believe that if there's a partnership with us, that we can help realize those outcomes. We're very privileged to call over 1,000 organizations clients of ours. We work with everyone from the likes of the Premier League and the NFL. I'm very proud to say that a lot of the content that Wimbledon are producing this week is some Two Circles made. But also on the other side, we work with a lot of brands, helping them solve complex marketing problems around investing in sport. And through all those relationships, we actually process over 1 billion fan data records every single year, and we speak to 450 million fans every single year as well. And that gives us, we think, quite a unique lens on what's going on. Hence our moniker, we know fans best. Now, for those of you who are at your first ever presentation from someone in the sports industry, tradition dictates that right now the speaker, before they get into the meat of the subject matter, talks about some of their own personal sporting journeys and their sporting pinnacle. And normally it's about a medal they won at a previous Olympics or a number of caps they achieved by representing their nation. And so I will also fulfill that tradition, and it's genuinely something I'm very proud of and very privileged that I once was able to represent the under-10Bs before my time as a managing director at Two Circles started. So let's get into it. It's an amazing time to be investing in sports IP. Sport is in rude health, and there are loads and loads of data points out there which illustrate this, and it is absolutely thriving. I'm conscious in this room today, lots of us are marketeers, and what we care about is attention and experience and consumption, because we want to be where our customers are and our potential customers are. And when we did the analysis on this, what we found is that the cumulative hours spent consuming sport is on this amazing upward trajectory. It was about 1.3 trillion hours in 2014 globally, went up to 3 trillion in 2024. But not just the rearview mirror brings us excitement, but looking ahead, it's going to rise to another 4 trillion in the next 10 years as well. There's not just going to be more fans, there's going to be more fans consuming more. And if we try and contextualize that a little bit, we thought, well, hang on, let's think about this in terms of human experience. So there's about 8 billion people in the world. They have 365 days in the year, and there's 24 hours in a day. Last time I counted, that counts up to about 72 trillion hours of total human experience per year. How is that divvied up? Well, let's break it down. There's about 25 trillion of those spent on sleep, and any of you who are averaging this kind of 8 hours a day, please come and find me afterwards and let me know your secret. As a father of 2, I find that incredibly difficult. But we've then got about 19 trillion on paid work and education, 16 on transit, chores, subsistence, those types of things, and about 11 on outright leisure. And the first time I saw this is absolutely what I expected to see all the sports consumption. But one of the things that I find so fascinating and interesting, and indeed exciting around this, is that the consumption of sport is actually bleeding into these other territories. One world in which I heard this described was people, listening to podcasts whilst they hoover. So sport isn't just this thing which is unique at the weekend. It's actually going into all these other areas of life, yet to get into sleep. Who knows what Apple will invent next that might get us into that. Now, when I first thought, why was that the case? I was, initially thinking maybe that's just a smartphone thing, a digital media thing. But we did the analysis on all the different channels against which attention is captured, and it was very, very interesting to see how that macro trend extends out into all the different channels. So just going through some really quickly, if we look at radio, it's almost doubled the amount of consumption on sport. Online press, it's tripled, 1.5x in linear TV broadcast, social media, 2.6x. Physical print even growing, even though it's supposedly dying on an overall trend. Streaming, as you'd expect to see, very, very large as well. And I'm really glad that we include attendance in that, because that is often the bedrock under which all the rest of this consumption stems from. So overall, a really powerful story. 2.3 times growth in people's consumption of sport. Sport is eating up attention, and that is one of the reasons we're so excited for the opportunity that presents for brands. Now, why is it doing that? And that could be a talk in its own right, but there's three things we wanted to highlight. The first of which, it continues to create moments that matter. It is just the most incredible generator of earned media. You get people saying, did you see that wicket? Did you see that jump? Did you see that goal? Did you see that shot? Appearing in your WhatsApp groups, at the water cooler the next day in sport, in the office. It continues to just get people talking and bring people together. What an incredible product. The second thing is that it's diversified a hell of a lot in the last 10 years. I'm sure many of you, like me, are hugely excited about the Women's Euros starting tomorrow, in fact. And it's amazing to think that 10 years ago, well, that wasn't quite such a big event, and that's just one of many examples. And the third area is the fact that it's just so much more than the live event itself. There's all the build-up, there's the shoulder coverage, there's the fact there's opening and closing ceremonies, we have docu-series, we have F1 movies, we have Ted Lasso. Sport permeates so many more domains than ever. And for all those reasons, that is why we believe sport IP is an amazing source and potential source of investment. So next, sponsorship and media spend needing better balance. So we've seen the fact there's all this attention pouring in. It has done historically, and longitudinally, it's going to continue as well. But how are brands driving value from all that attention? Well, again, when we did the analysis on brands' investment into sport, what we saw was that there's $250 billion being invested in activating in sport via sponsorship and media. And again, we took a longitudinal view on that to say, well, is that always the case? Is it going up? Is it going down? What's the trend? Again, I'm delighted to say it's this really powerful growth story. About $100 billion 10 years ago, up to $250 billion last year. Do you remember earlier I saw that chart saying that there's been attention growth of about 2.3x? Well, that's manifesting itself in brands' investments at a factor of about 2.5. The thing that's really interesting to us is just looking one level deeper on that and breaking out sponsorship from media. And at that point, you can see that actually, whilst that is overall growth and it's growing up in absolute terms, it's this allocation to sponsorship which has actually shrunk from 29% to 19%, which gives us pause for thought. And I'm sure, actually, that instinctively kind of stacks up. Again, lots of marketeers in the room, you're constantly thinking where to divvy up your marketing dollars. And we've seen amazing growth and capability and returns from some of the options available down the media avenues. And again, if you go back and actually look at some of the major providers in that space and see how they have performed over this time period, doesn't really surprise anyone, I'm sure, to see the likes of Alphabet, Meta, ByteDance, and Amazon reporting significant annual growth rates when it comes to how they are seeing revenue growth from their ad businesses. And 5% is nothing to be sniffed at. It's just looking at that alongside this really brings it home as to why we've seen that shifting from about 30% in 2014 down to about 19% in 2024. And I think the question many people would ask at that point is, well, why? Now, look, there are amazing benefits to both sponsorship and media, and I'm not here to decry either of them, and I think they've both got lots and lots of value they can add in lots of different ways. I think it's clear to everyone in this room, if we think about sponsorship, it establishes an amazing amount of emotional connection between brands, and you see the IP association you get through that by forming these long-term partnerships with properties. It also gives you the ability to activate across multiple different channels and reach and visibility in quite a unique way. Media, meanwhile, particularly where media is going at the moment, enables you to get that mass reach, but also be highly targeted in who you're going after, and particularly at kind of bottom of funnel moments, in a way which you can actually serve yourself as well. So there's a less of a need to maybe rely on third party to do that. Again, it's really, really great. But I guess the question is, well, what's the right balance between sponsorship and media? And should it be close to about 30, or should it be closer to that 19? Well, what we would start to hypothesize, and maybe even go one step further than hypothesizing and saying, is that we think that maybe there's been an overcorrection, or it's been overbalanced towards media. And I'm sure each of you can think, if you had to justify a certain number of spend to your CFO, it's often easier to justify this side than it is this side. But just because it's harder to measure value over here doesn't mean the value isn't there. And what's interesting, that's not just our perspective, but we're now seeing some of the biggest spenders and spenders who go into the sports world beginning to say this publicly, that they feel they have overcorrected too. and not just kind of in quiet, closed-door Chatham House rules environments, but to their institutional investors. This is true of both endemic and non-endemic brands alike. So you have to look at some of these quotes that are coming out. You've got global media directors saying we were over-investing in this area. You've got Nike, one of the biggest sports marketers in the world, saying we were starting to shift dollars from performance marketing to brand marketing. And Honda over here saying that they've been too focused on the short term. You go down the media side to chase that quarter's results when actually there's an amazing amount of brand building that can be done over on the sponsorship side. Now, one thing I want to stress, this is not me saying, by the way, 30 cents of every $1 of marketing you spend has to be on sponsorship. Absolutely not. But I would be thinking, well, what is your 90 and what is your 30? And what is right for you? Look, that's an incredibly nuanced question, and we all have different objectives. We're at different stages of digital maturity, and we've got different dynamics. And one analogy we've used to articulate that, it's a bit like asking, what's the right balance between diet and exercise? Well, the ultramarathon runner will have a very different answer to that question to the individual who might be recovering from some surgery. It's a very, very nuanced question. It's personal. It depends on what else is going on. It can change. And it's definitely not easy as well. But I guess what we would be encouraging each of you to think about is, should you be more 19% than 30%? Has it swung too far in one way than the other? And that's the rebalancing we are talking about. Okay, final point, we're nearly there, is this whole notion of intelligence being key to unlocking more value. Now, I'm sure many of the marketers in the room will be aware that there's lots and lots of different opportunities out there to invest sponsorship dollars. In fact, literally, there are thousands of choices, and I'm sure many of them are very, very good at sending you these glossy decks which say, well, they are the best property in the world with some very nice-looking media value figures. But what we think is really key, and not just in identifying the property, but actually activating brilliantly and indeed evaluating it, is bringing intelligence to that. I mean, you've seen a few examples here of how we believe data can serve as a compass to help us make the right choices. Well, we think if we can infuse intelligence into those conversations, that will help you find the right balance between that 19 and between that 30 and help you at every single stage of the funnel. Now, look, in that report I referenced earlier, there are lots and lots of examples of that, about how Orange use strategy to help their audience-led approach, so Orange use data in their strategy to take an audience-led approach. We're seeing this more and more when it comes to activation. Can we be more focused on outcomes? So is it going to find me new customers and acquire new customers rather than outputs, rather than just how many likes or impressions am I getting on that? And finally, from an evaluation standpoint, taking intelligence in, let's not try and make up an ROI number if ROI is actually going to be return on objective, what is more relevant and pertinent. And all three of these, along with many, many other examples, are covered in that report that I highlighted at the beginning. So really, that's it. That was a whistle-stop tour that we tried to keep relatively quick of what is a lot of data and a lot of analysis that we have in this report. The three things I'd encourage you to all take away and think about is that it is an absolutely amazing time to be investing in sports IP. There's all the data showing how attention is flooding in new ways, providing new opportunities like we've never seen before. Sponsorship and media spend, they are both incredibly valid and incredibly useful for your organization. But what is the right balance? And in finding out that right balance, but also activating it brilliantly and indeed evaluating it, try and infuse intelligence into it throughout as far as you can. It's been a great pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.